GM, everybody. Welcome back to FraxCheck, your weekly Frax vibe check. I'm your host, Capital K, and I'll be taking you straight to the source of truth via checking the chain. But before we do, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button. We appreciate it. Guys and gals, this week I'm calling it a turning point? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Because if the market is green, things are good, but there are other signs that we are upticking up in here. So let's dive right in. But first, we always got to check the flagship stablecoin. Here we see that we are flat for the last 2 months since basically middle of September. Our supply of Frax, the stablecoin, is 672 million. Nothing else much to report. Moving on. Here, we check the peg as you should for all stablecoins. And the peg got as high as $1 and as low as 0.999 per the dashboard. But you know us here. If you've been here for a while, you know we can't trust dashboards all the time. So we got to hop into the markets. And I found out that you could swap up to $85 million of Frax for USDC, and you'll still get an exchange rate of 0.994. Now, previously, I've always done 100 million. However, I decided to test the limit of where we can get up to for 99 for a 99 cents exchange rate. So here we have an upper limit of 85 million. And the majority of that liquidity, though, is going to be coming from the Frax BP as well as the Frax USDC Uniswap pair. Okay. But aside from the peg for a stable coin, you also got to check the balance sheet, guys. And the balance sheet here is kind of amazing because Frax Finance has a updated block by block balance sheet that is kind of unparalleled anywhere else. So as you can see here, we have our assets, liabilities, and the balance thereof, which I like to call equity, but I know that's a scary word, but that is what it is. And assets equals liabilities plus equity. And here, our assets increased by $6 million. Our liabilities decreased by 400K, which meant that our equity must have increased. And here we saw that it bumped up by 6.7. Now, the numbers kind of don't add up here, but that is a rounding error. Okay, just because we're working with fairly large numbers here. Now, and also the fact that it updates per block. So things are moving as I'm taking these screenshots. But anyways, here we're going to dive in a bit deeper into the assets, liabilities, and what it means. So to translate, we have our most critical metric to cover. And here's kind of like my first sign where things are a changing. Our collateral ratio, okay? This has always been a topic of contention. And here we have a 93.9% collateral ratio. Kind of like to see that, right? This is a 93.9%. We got as low as, I believe, 91 earlier during the whole crazy drawdown of CRV. And now we're at a 93.9% increase of 1.3% over the last 2 weeks. So we've been bumping up and up. Here, if you want to calculate this at home, you could go to fax.frax.finance. Make sure you click on the Frax stablecoin page and click on balance sheet, and you'll see the total assets, which is 819 million, subtracting the lock liquidity of 122 million, giving you treasury assets of 696 million. Now you divide that by the Frax supply, which is 742 million, giving you a 93.9% collateral ratio. Oh my goodness, we are pumped. Now, moving on, we got to check the Frax BP, which is effectively the manifestation of the Frax stablecoin as a liquidity product. Here, Frax BP saw a nice bump in TVL of 8% up to 133.7 million. of which 87 million is Frax and 45 million is USDC. Granted, this is slightly, I wouldn't say imbalanced, but this is pretty much where we've always been comfortably, which is 66% Frax and 33% USDC. Now, for the month of October, though, what's interesting is we've facilitated $74 million in volume. That translates to about 55%, which is quite awesome because I've seen weeks where we did like 2%. So this is actually quite active. Now, if we were to compare all Frax related pool on Curve, which are Frax BP, Frax 3CRV, and Frax PP, that's the one with Frax and USDP, we have about 200 and odd 7 million around there. What's interesting is we are finally above 3 pool again. If for the loyal listeners, you know that I was tracking this ratio between all of Frax's coins versus or Frax related pools versus 3 pool. We got as high as like a 3.4x, I want to say, ratio between the two. And just last week we were in like the 0.8x of 3 pool. And now we're finally back above 1. So man, what a wild journey it has been. But it's again really impressive that Frax is able to both scale up and scale down. All right. I think that is notable and it should be lauded. Now, moving on, we have another, I guess you can call it the savings account, almost like a liquidity black hole, really, for or Frax black hole, which is SFRAX. This is where you could single-sidedly supply your Frax to earn the treasury bill rates, which is currently right now 5.4%. And here we see we have a supply of 34.3 million, which is actually a massive decrease from just 2 weeks ago at 23%, which we were at 44 million. So that's a fairly large decrease since 2 weeks ago. But what's notable is that only 1.5% of SFRAX holders dropped out, meaning the majority of the holders were, or rather the 3 holders that left accounted for like 10 million in TVL, which probably means that they had to withdraw to go ape into the market if I were to speculate. But regardless, we want to check the facts here. And the facts shows that for the source of Frax, of where people are getting these deposits, 97% of them are getting it from aggregators, meaning they went out there, bought Frax with some asset, and then staked it into here and earning this 5% yield. So that's awesome to see that people are not leveraging, because at one point, 20% of the SFRAX in here was from borrows. So that was obviously they're going to leave once the carry trade doesn't make sense anymore. But now that you see here, these are 97% of these folks are really committed and using it as like a savings account per se. Now, moving on, we have our favorite, the FrxETH. Here we have 291,735 Frax Ethereums, which is a 3.6% increase from 2 weeks ago. Well, where are all of these FrxETH hanging out? 3/4 is in the FrxETH, earning that sweet native ETH yield. About 18% is chilling across all the FrxETH, FrxETH, FrxETH liquidity pools on Curve. And then the remaining 6% is just hanging in the ether. This is the monetary premium, guys, that we've been talking about, where holders are happily just holding on to FrxETH, either vanilla in their wallet or use somewhere else in the ecosystem so as to not take away yields from everybody else that is in the Frax, that is in the kind of like the native ecosystem. That's what you want to hear. That's what you want to see. And at one point, this else bucket got as high as, I believe, 11%. So that was when like people were really taking their FrxETH out there and farming hard. And next slide, you'll see again the FrxETH is still a stable coin, so you got to check the peg. And when we do that, we went to 1 inch, swap 3,500 FraxETH, which gives us a 0.997 exchange rate. Beautiful, beautiful. 2 weeks ago, we got a 0.977 exchange rate. That is not great. To be completely honest, that when I saw that, I was quite distraught because I don't like to pay 30 bips to swap. I'm sorry, not 30 bips. I don't want to pay anything more than like 4 bips or 0.5% for me to 40 bips, sorry, to pay nothing more than 40 bips, because that would be the same as a regular swap, right? Because a regular swap is like 30 bips. You want to pay less than that because you're swapping between stable assets. And kind of here is like we're right at the threshold. 2 weeks ago, it was way above. So I'm glad to see things are balancing out. Now, on the other hand, all of the combined TVL of the curve of the FraxETH in the curve liquidity pool is 156 million in TVL. That is spread across the FraxETH, FrxETH, and FrxETH pools. But in aggregate, the balance between all of them is that it's about 71% FrxETH and 29% others. Again, pushing on that imbalance, I frankly don't like it, but we got as high as like 80-20 this 2 weeks ago. So improving in the right direction is what I can say. But one area that we've been going real strong in is the market share. We are holding on to our 2.5%, guys and gals. It has been a challenge just to hold on to this 2.5%. You wouldn't believe it. But you see here, we do have some shining hope as our 30-day change is actually at 6.4% versus Lido's 30-day change at 1.6%, and then Rocket Pool's 30-day change at 3.8%. Love to see this. We are like leaps ahead of our competitors here. Frankly, we're still much smaller than our competitors, so I wish we kind of cranked it up just a tad. But I am not going to complain when a month ago we were actually under both of these guys. So I'm glad to see that we again are turning in the right direction. Possible turning point. Moving on. But one area that we're definitely on top of all the time is the yield department. Here we have 4.2% APY, which is again top leading the pack. But another kind of milestone I want to point out here is we are at about 600 million TVL for FraxETH. I believe somebody somewhere tweeted that Frax is the only one that has like 3 products, quote unquote, that is on the top 100 coins, which is obviously FraxETH, FraxETH, Frax, and FXS. Kind of awesome to see. Very happy to see that. Much deserved. Again, biased. We are biased. But anyways, here are some statistics that are not biased and are math. If you were to take 1,000 FraxETH and stake it, or rather, you were to take 1,000 ETH and stake it into SFRAXETH, you would earn 42% more than you would have with RETH and 27% more than you would have with STETH. I'm not cherry picking. I'm literally going at the point of time when FraxETH was founded, very beginning, basically a year, and you run it, and this is what you would get. Okay, so I don't have to tell you how it kind of compounds pretty ridiculously. Regardless, moving on, we have our third stablecoin. I like to call it the middle child, which is FPI. This is the Frax Price Inflation Index. So or index. So that means it tracks inflation, CPI. Here we actually saw our very first decrease in the FPI supply by 500K down to 84.5 million, previously at 85. The annual inflation index is at 3.7%, so that's what FPI is supposed to track. And fortunately, FPI is actually above peg by 40 bips, leading the pack again. Here for the Treasury TVL, though, we saw a 92.8 million, pretty much flat. And the convex FPI Frax controller controls about 36%. And then the equity portion, which is where we take all the assets on the balance sheet, which is the TVL, subtract all the liabilities, which is the FPI, you get a remaining equity balance of 4 million. Again, if FPI were to say collapse or not collapse, like we're just shut down or wind down, well, there's $4 million that's ready to be spread for maybe VEFPIS holders or just vanilla FPIS holders. We don't know, but no matter what, there is a nice 4 million buffer to make sure everybody gets made whole for the FPI holders. Now, for the first leg of the DeFi or second leg of the DeFi Trinity, which is Frax Lend. I personally really like this product. I think it is a great way that we took our own destiny into our own hands and created a sub protocol to support our stablecoins. Here we have a TVL of $245 million, and we've been hovering around this 225 to 250 million TVL, so nothing quite drastically changes there. And also on the borrow side, we have 63 million borrowed, which represents a 79% utilization rate. Now, Frax Lend AMO is the largest lender in Frax Lend. And we'll talk about their profitability a little bit later, but that has been a big, big moneymaker for Frax. And it's also important to note that these are people who are willing to hold on to Frax as a debt. So, meaning they're willing to take Frax as a debt instrument and then go and use that Frax for whatever purpose they want. You get to see it. And here you see the red lines that I drew on the graph. I wish I screenshot it a bit better or edited a bit better so you guys could see the headlines. But effectively, it is talking about how, let me think about how to say this. It's the collateral value of people putting the assets into Frax. And then the other one is the amount borrowed. So you see here, this is 63 million borrowed, which is kind of in the middle ground. Like I said, we've pretty much been hovering around this range. And then on the other hand, this is how much people are supplying to the protocol, okay, which is about 160 million worth. So pretty freaking awesome, in my opinion. We're in this range. We are hanging on and we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Lastly, we have the final leg of the DeFi Trinity, which is Frax Swap. Here we have a 65 million TVL, which is a 6.6% increase from 2 weeks ago. And for the month of October, we have facilitated $48 million. That is a 73% utilization rate. One of the top DEXs for sure that nobody talks about and facilitating great volume relative to his TVL. And FXS has been a huge reason for this high utilization rate, because normally for the FXS Frax pair, we get around the 11 to 15 million. For the last 7 days, we got 26 million. Okay. And during the bear market, I mean, it's probably still a bear market right now, but earlier, deeper in the bear, it got as low as like 3 million for 7-day volume. Now that was like, I thought we were not going anywhere fast. Let's just say that. But anyways, now we get to my favorite part of the FraxCheck, which is the profitability. So show me the money, right? And like I promised earlier, I'm going to talk about Frax Lend right away. So Frax the FraxLen AMO to be specific, is the largest lender on FraxLen. They lent about 58.8 million or 59 million, call it that, of Frax onto the FraxLen protocol. And that decreased actually by 2.2 million from 2 weeks ago. We used to provide almost like 63 million. 62 million into the Frax Lend, but we've dialed it back. But for November so far, we've made about $84,000, which is about 42K per week. And if you kind of annualize that, you get a bit more than a $2 million run rate. So this protocol that Frax built for itself and is currently using it for itself is generating $2 million in profit for the protocol. That is just freaking awesome. and the year ain't even over yet. So yeah, that's all I can say. This is such a powerful product, and I'm so happy to see that we are dogfooding ourselves and we are the largest users. What else I'm happy to see about is that nobody got liquidated in November. Good work, everybody. The market only ripped up, so I am glad you guys are staying safe out there. But please continue to stay safe. You don't know what's going to happen, so make sure you manage your risk appropriately. Now, we got to talk about the FPI monthly revenue. Here, we saw that in November, it pulled in about 31.5K, which is great because in the month of October, it actually broke even, like up like 1K or something. But the month before that, we were down quite bad. But you see that behind the graph here, we've been bleeding slowly down. Like the yields has been collapsing, but so has the expense. So we're able to still keep ahead of it and add to that balance buffer, like I mentioned earlier, that 4 million buffer. But things are getting squeezed. Things are getting squeezed here. Now, lastly, we have the FrxETH revenue. The way I like to calculate this is, well, before I get into that, for November, the revenue estimated is about 134K. The way I got to that is you take the average income, which is 27.2 ETH, multiply that by 365 days, then multiply that by 8% fee share, which is what Frax is currently kind of charging. And then you divide that by 12 months, which gives you the monthly figure, which is where we arrived at 134K. And with that, I'm going to see you guys next week. But before I let you go, again, please make sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on that bell notification so you know whenever I do another Frax check. Because I got to, out of all else, I got to keep us objective and I got to keep you informed by checking the chain. Here to give you it straight to the source of truth and taking you to the source of truth is 0x_K. You can find me on Twitter, hit me up on Telegram, and I will see you in 2 weeks.